Well, wouldn't you know, everybody, we've made it to 2 weeks in a row, episode 2 of Movie Night with Mr. Entertainment to you. And here we are to talk about Casablanca, a very famous film, 1942, because we are doing the cool thing where you put the year of the movie in the title. Just makes it seem so pretty and so important, I guess. I don't know what I'm trying to say. When Red Letter Media credits movies in the corner of their thing to tell you what the footage is on screen, they do that. Cineflix does that too. It's got that vibe, if you know what I mean. Speaking of vibes, we're talking about Casablanca here today. This was the second movie we chose to do, and by we I mean me. I think I said in the last one what the first three were going to be, so I guess I say it here anyway, so everybody can watch it in anticipation, and we all know, we'll all be on the same page when I talk about it next. But the next one is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Speaking of Red Letter Media, it was because I recently watched the Red Letter Media review, so I know all the spoilers for that movie, but nonetheless I was very interested, so that'll be next week's movie. But last time I said we were going to do Blonde, which we were doing, as I said that, and then Casablanca, and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit will be the third week. After that, I haven't decided yet. But after this, I think it might be another old black and white movie, because what an impression this one left on me. Where should we start? We got to talk about what I knew about Casablanca going in, but I feel like there's a little bit more housekeeping to do. I took notes, but not for the intro, which is probably what I should take the notes for. Not as many notes for this movie as there was for Blonde. Not as long either, only about an hour and 48 minutes or something, this movie. The interesting thing is that it has all the credits are at the beginning, so sometimes when you see a movie's runtime, you're like, it's like 10 minutes shorter because there's going to be a bunch of credits at the end. Because it's an old-timey movie, there are only brief credits at the beginning. I think in those Looney Tunes documentary videos I watched, I can't remember the channel's name, but those were very good videos. They would talk about that too, how in the Looney Tunes shorts, the only person credited was like the director and somebody else at the very beginning, as well as like the producer dude, who doesn't really work on the actual thing, and like all the other animators just go uncredited. I'm sure this happens. I'm sure there's worker rights revolutions from 1942 onwards, so that there are now credits at the end of movies where everybody gets credited or legally has to get credited. I actually don't know. I feel like I hear people say, there's this is the uncredited writer for this, so maybe you don't have to legally be credited. I don't know. But that was a weird tangent at the beginning about duration. But anyway, I guess we'll go into it. I guess I'll say what I rated it now. Everybody should be following the Letterboxd, as you know, as I quickly get it up, because I'm an idiot and didn't get it up beforehand. But on Letterboxd, I actually, and I think this might change as I talk myself into the full 5-star rating as we go through this. I did give it 4.5 stars. We'll talk about why specifically in a second. I'm just noticing all the new Halloween movie reviews here. There seems to be a lot of 3 stars. Now, I can't even remember how the fuck you're supposed to check your own shit. It has recent activity Blonde 5, but no Casablanca recent activity. I guess that's just because I didn't do a review for Casablanca. I just gave it a rating. But even then, it's not showing up. I guess Blonde shows up first there because it's by date. Activity, friends, no, me. Fuck these friends. Yeah, it's Casablanca 4.5. We'll see. We'll talk as we progress, and maybe I'll just bump it up to 5-star. Maybe I'll do it right now. You can't stop me, chat. But anyway. So overall, very positive review. This is not going to be a hot take Casablanca. Now, I do follow Craftsdorf on Letterboxd, and he did give the movie 3 stars, which was an interesting thing I saw down there, but that's besides the point. I've never heard him talk about it. I know his reasoning. Not that reason matters here, but anyway. Casablanca going in. I was interested in this one because it's a movie I've vaguely been interested for a long time. What I understood it to be was very different to what it was. I thought it was just like a World War II movie where, I guess how I know this is there is a Mad Men episode, I believe in season 3, That is sort of a riff, sort of a mini parody of Casablanca, or the love story in that episode is likened to Casablanca a lot. It's a Roger episode. Actually, I don't even know if it's a Roger episode, or this might just be the B plot of that episode. Though I think it is the A plot, and it is a Roger episode. And I think it is in season 3. It could be in season 2. I know it's in the old office in Mad Men, but it's the dog food episode, if you remember that. The crew over at the Mad Men offices. The Sterling Cooper offices. For a second there, I couldn't remember the name of the office. Can you fucking believe that? Mad Men, the rewatch needs to happen soon, I guess. But anyway, I was just in the middle of a rewatch. I got to partway through season 2. But nonetheless, where was I up to in our storytelling here? It's in the old offices. So it has to be one of the first 3 seasons. Spoiler alert. But Roger meets an old girlfriend of his who, I was talking about the problem faced with the Mad Men people. As if every episode is about a little ad problem. Well, that's what Mad Men is actually about. It's House or something, where every episode there's a new case to be solved in the field of medicine. Nonetheless, a dog food company is in trouble because they've been it was an expose on them that they put horse in their dog food or something, and so they need a new ad campaign to overcome this. They come to the men. They come to Don, Sterling Cooper. Roger is an ex-lover of the woman who is now in charge. I think she's a widow. In the episode, but her and Roger were in love when they were younger. Actually, maybe I should have rewatched the episode before doing this. That might have been cute. I might do that afterwards. I don't know. I'll tweet about it if anything interesting comes of it, because I don't know how deeply they reference it. But obviously they were in love when they were younger, but she left him to go marry the dog food company guy, and now she's in charge of it and stuff like that. And the joke at the end of the episode, after they sort of rekindle things quickly, now Roger is married to Jane at this point. So I guess it has to be season 3, or a very late season 2 episode, but it's probably season 3. So there is that aspect of being married and sort of the cheating and going back, and sort of the momentary relapse that they have that is also in Casablanca. And they have the conversation where they liken it to Casablanca, and Roger's like, you left me for a dog food bloke, and in the movie she leaves him for the dude that's gonna help end World War II, and the joke is that these things are not too comparable, but obviously the structure of the romance throughout is the structure of the episode is Casablanca-esque. Now, another movie we could watch coming up is The Apartment, which Mad Men has a lot of movie references and things to that, but I know episode 10 of season 1, I know the specifics for this one because I've been half putting off making a video about that episode for 3 years now. Does a similar thing with The Apartment, I believe, or they might just talk about it. That's also, I think, the episode where I actually think last time we talked about this episode because of the Marilyn Monroe tie-in, but then I came to the conclusion that that wasn't the episode with the Marilyn Monroe tie-in, nonetheless. So I knew how the movie ended, is the point. I knew that she leaves him for a dude who's gonna save World War I, or save the world in World War II, and she gets on the plane. Obviously, you'd come to know that you know a lot of these lines, but didn't know specifically they were from Casablanca. But nonetheless, I knew the ending. Now, the ending that I envisioned was very different. I assumed she would leave him and he would be sad, but instead it's him making her leave with him, which was a twist. But obviously, I knew that they weren't going to end up together throughout. I don't think this affected my viewing experience too much. I'm not big on spoilers at all. Or that spoilers ruin anything or anything like that. And I love rewatches, so if you're spoiling everything going in, it's almost like a rewatch on the first watch, and nothing can be more incredible than that. Point out again the House of the Dragon reviews. New House of the Dragon episode tomorrow. Can you believe it? This is being recorded a little bit in the future. Also, I watched this, I think either the night I recorded the Blonde review or the day after. So nearly a week ago, maybe? Probably not. Maybe 4 days ago. When did I upload it from now? It doesn't matter. But obviously I'm going to schedule these to come out 1 week after each other. So I might be a little ahead. If something big happens in the world and I make reference not to it, that'll be why. Because this was recorded a few weeks earlier. Now, I don't know if I'll ever get a few weeks ahead, but I'm very excited to watch movies is fun, I found out. And I want to watch Roger Rabbit as soon as possible, and I might do it later tonight, even though it is 10 p.m. now. I'm on the true D-Gen sleep schedule again. So yeah, we've been watching things. It'd be fun. But that's what I knew going in. I expected it to. I didn't know that Casablanca was a location. I didn't know that this was going to be set in French Morocco. I didn't know that this was I assumed it was going to be like higher. I thought they were going to be having meetings with the president and like the general of the. Well, I guess the president is the commander in chief, which is a general, but generals might be underneath that. Whatever. I thought we were going to be having meetings with high up. I feel like I saw like a shot of a scene one time on a YouTube video or something, and it might have been them all sitting at a table. And I might have thought like, oh, we're meeting with them because we're going to end World War II. This is what Roger told me. So I thought it was going to be more directly involved than that or something. But no, it's sort of like this small tale that will have a sort of knock-on effect and is sort of allegorical for ending the war and things like that, which we'll get into as we progress here. So it was very different than what I expected. I think we talked about this also last time. This is another interesting bit of context, is that besides The Wizard of Oz, which I think I watched in like first grade, they showed it to us. So this is the oldest movie I think I've ever seen. Though actually I think I have seen because in Australia, when you're an Australian young person, I was going to say young man, but the girls went on the trip too. You go to Canberra in grade 7 usually. I think they might have axed that now, because it might be in grade 6 now, because grade 7 is now at high school. We don't need to go into all that. But one of the places we went to was like the Film Institute or the Film Archive or something. And I remember them showing us like super old. I think I've seen the meme one about the train that comes in where everybody says, oh, when people first saw it in a theater, they thought the train was coming at them and they all screamed and ran out or something. Also, they showed us one of the earliest movies, which was a recording of like the 1897. This is the number that's coming to me. It's probably not true. Melbourne Cup, which is a big horse race in Australia that happens every year. I think in November, right? So it'll be coming up soon. And they said like, oh, this was one of the first things ever recorded or whatever, or sporting events ever recorded with a camera. So I saw that. I think they showed us that there. I remember it was in a big auditorium. That would have been so cool, but like you're such a dumb kid when you're like 11 or 12 that you don't give a fuck about any of these things. But yeah, wasted opportunities, Lamau, when you're 12. You should go to Canberra when you're fucking 23, and that'd be some fun shit. But nonetheless, so those technically would be old films that I've seen. In that Looney Tunes documentary series, I wish I could remember the channel name off my head to recommend it. Just look up like Looney Tunes documentary or something. Or I think it is Looney Tunes, not like Warner Brothers. But anyway, in that they show a bunch of old cartoons, right? Oh, that probably might not be true, because I probably have seen, because I have DVD collections of Bugs Bunny shorts and things like that I've had since I was like 7 as a kid. And a lot of them I think might have been like late 30s, early 40s. So those might have been older than this too, but they're not full movies, they're just shorts. Nonetheless, might be the oldest movie I've ever seen. 12 Angry Men is a 60s movie, I'm pretty sure. Is it like 57 or something? But it's not as old as this one. It was not my first black and white movie because of 12 Angry Men and all the memory around that. So we're delving more into movies than I really ever have through the series, so I guess it's important to take note of these things and track them. It'll be interesting, especially when I'm interested in doing another one. Gone with the Wind is 39, I believe, which is one that was definitely on the radar. And that's, I think Citizen Kane is 41. I remember years, or I vaguely communicate things or relate things to years in my brain, which might not be right. But these are ones that obviously we could watch moving forward. But yes, maybe we should start getting into bullshit instead of Citizen Kane was 41. I'm a fucking genius. 39. Oh my god, I'm the greatest fucking rememberer of all time, because Gone with the Wind was 1939. This is what happens when you're raised on wrestling and you remember years, and the first thought you have whenever you think of a given year is the Royal Rumble of that year, and then you contextualize things through that lens. Broken brain, and it also makes you remember years and things like that. 1914 to 1918, 1939 to 1945. I can't remember the Vietnam one too well though. Speaking of those years, the movie is set in 1941, I believe. Now, Pearl Harbor, I do not have an exact date on. I think that is just because of this. Yeah, it is 41. December of 41. Because when this is filmed and set, America has not yet entered the war, and obviously the allegory is the American in the movie getting involved and separating from isolationism, however you say it, and getting involved in the conflict to save the day. Lamau, just like the war, remember, guys? What a great allegory. Nonetheless, we'll explore that later as we get into it. But, just on the movie thing, obviously you can recommend movies in the comments section below, and I might or might not ignore them. Actually, I won't ignore them. I'll look at them, but I might or might not take them into note. But nonetheless, I think the first note here, besides what I knew about Casablanca going in, was the lines. Obviously, a very interesting thing, especially, this isn't even a thing you realize on initial viewings, but when I was watching The Godfather 2 or 3 or 4, God, it's been a long time, maybe even 5 years ago now, I remember one time looking up like where certain quotes came from, and it's insane that the quote, keep your friends close but your enemies closer, or whatever. Now this is in some old Greek play, but the thing I googled, and I remember this, says, and as we've established, I remember everything. That line is like popularized by that movie. Now, obviously, I was born in 2001. I've been hearing that ubiquitously, it seems, for my entire life. So it's sort of like, man, something invented that line. How clever. And it's in every fucking story you've ever seen. It's going to be said in every Pokemon episode. Not every, but one Pokemon episode, one Yu-Gi-Oh episode. So it's ingratiated into me as a kid. What a clever line to invent, even if it has become a cliche since. Casablanca has a lot of these lines where you're like, oh my god, everybody says this line, and I bet most people, especially contemporaneously, don't even know that this is where this comes from. And I noted a few of them down. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life. I feel like the beginning of that is said more, like maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. And this is probably reiterated in a bunch of different things. Also, I didn't actually look these up to see if these come from Casablanca, but I assume they did, and if not, well, you can correct me in the comments as well. Obviously, this is from the end of the movie, and yeah, this is regrets and stuff. People say this stuff all the time. It's an iconic quote. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, which is like the last line of the movie, I believe. Is something people say all the time. Well, all of these are things people say all the time, but this is another one. I think this might be the biggest one of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world. She walks into mine. I don't know. Again, I don't know any examples of places where I've heard these lines before. Are you just in like common parlance, or I'm sure they're referenced in a bunch of things. I'm sure I've seen a bunch of Casablanca references, and I don't know, maybe Family Guy or The Simpsons, or in an old Pokemon episode, or in an old episode of anything I've ever seen. Yeah, they're in it, but I can't think of any other specific examples of this. But yes, obviously, a very famous line. That's probably my favorite line, I guess, from besides from Play It, Sam, or whatever. But anyway, Here's Looking at You, Kid is another one that I recognize, but I don't think this one's said as much. I don't think calling your lover kid is going to be looked on favorably, especially the more contemporaneous you get, going through the years, but especially now. It is obviously the motif. It is like the line that's repeated the most in the movie. But it might be my least favorite of these. Maybe that's why it's 4.5 stars. Actually, it kind of is, but not specifically because of the line. But certain things around the romance. But we'll talk about that assuredly as we progress. If I gave you any thought, I probably would from the very beginning. Yeah, another one. Everybody, I've heard this a million times. Kiss Me As If It Were the Last Time is obviously another one too. Those are some of the ones I've written down. There are others too. It's just interesting and cute when you're like, so this is where these come from. It's sort of a context thing. So whenever somebody says this in the future, and if you want to be a prick, you can be the prick at the party that says, haha, you know where that's from? Bet you don't, loser. And then you dunk on them. Steal their girl, like Casablanca, except I guess you give them back at the end. That sounded very objectifying, womanizing of me. Give her back? What's that mean? But nonetheless, drink. Where do we want to go from here, chat? We could go in a million different directions. The very next point is it's a vibe, Lamau. Remember when everybody was saying that like a year and a half ago? Everything's so pretty, everything's so formal, everyone's so witty, the way people talk. Now, obviously, they have like the old-timey people speak, the old-timey performative way people speak. I swear I saw a YouTube video that talks about the why people speak this way in old radios and things and on old TV shows, because this is how you had to speak for the mic to pick it up properly, and it's also an ambiguous accent thing. That's a whole different story. There's such a grace to everything in this movie where it all feels so nice and so much better than reality in some sense of a way. And I think it might be the chief draw of the movie is sort of it's not dreamlike, it's not formal, it's not picturesque necessarily, though a lot of the shots are very pretty. I guess romanticized might be the word, and obviously since it's so old, you're like, was everything like this at the time? And the answer is probably no to that, but a sort of romantic look back, and especially if old people today look back when maybe they were kids in this sort of era, with sort of a romantic nostalgic look. But everything about it's so serene. The niceness of the saloon, the high end tablecloths. I don't know if I've ever been to a restaurant like that in real life, but it's cool to watch in movies, and I remember seeing them all the time in Mad Men, and I was like, man, that looks cool. Fine dining, Lamau. But everything about it, the way they talk, how everybody is witty, everybody being involved, everybody having sort of a personality that's like quirky. This is a whole tangent, but I feel like the funny thing about the internet and everybody being more connected, we can take like a lane talking point here, through the wired, everybody is more connected, Lamau. I feel like it's sort of meshed everybody together in a certain way, where you would think like the internet would make everybody stand out more as they search for like ways to stand out, but I feel like it just has meshed everybody together so that almost everybody has like one personality, and that personality kind of fucking sucks and is boring. So it's interesting to see also the diverse personalities in this. Or maybe this is a sign of the different times where you're sort of allowed to just be informed, sort of. Taking my jumper off, so that was probably muffled audio. They can just sort of, I don't know, in a world where the internet doesn't exist, where you're not so interconnected, you can just sort of become what you want to be. I feel like the internet and everybody being connected and everybody posting things makes everybody much more insecure than they would be otherwise. Much more aware of sort of way most people outperform them in most areas, or probably in all areas. Whereas you could sort of be ignorantly blissful, I guess, in the past. And that sort of would create more confidence and more, I don't know, just a more bold personality than everybody sort of conforming because they're scared, or united in their own insecurity and don't want to stand out and things like that. What a tangent. But nonetheless, the vibe, it's great. All the characters are great. It's like, I don't know, there's just a wistful feeling that you get while watching the whole thing where you are sort of taken away. Escapism might be what we're talking about here. You are just sort of taken away to this place. The pacing of the movie is also very well done. The only video I watched about this was, there was an old The Take video, back when they were still called Screen Prism. It's like Pace in the Corner. I don't remember what the video was called, but if you look up Casablanca video essay, I think it's like the first thing that comes up. It's the only one I watched. There were a few others, but I'll watch them later or something. But it talked about how the pacing of the movie is very odd for the time, because there's not a lot of lingering shots. It's very fast-paced and things like that. So we'll have to keep that in mind if we're watching other older movies. They might be slower, but you saw, I liked Blonde more than this movie, all right? And that thing is much slower paced than this, so slow pace will not derail me. But we shouldn't linger on me thinking that Blonde is better than this, huh? That'll get me in a lot of trouble, I think. But the pacing specifically, it might have influenced sort of this pacing as we continued throughout film history to be quicker paced and no sort of wasted notion or no slow shot. The movie is an hour and 40 minutes long or whatever, but it goes by in a breeze. It's very quick. It's also very dense, though, which is important. But we'll talk about all that later. But yes, in that video, one of the big notes is the allegory stuff and the pacing stuff. And yeah, the pace is definitely like very quick and fulfilling, and let's go. I think this is even, and this is another big talking point I have written down, big note. Especially when Ilsa is initially introduced and sort of the pace in which things are revealed, it just sort of comes at you. It doesn't feel rushed or anything, but it just comes at you. And then like the scene after you get all the tension and the mystery is the flashback, and it's sort of just done initially, or immediately rather. And I don't know, the flow of it works so well. Should we go into that? My next note is about the plot. I guess we can get this out of the way. The plot catches you off guard. You expect the Nazi to immediately just find and kill Victor, but they can't because they are in unoccupied France. Though if Louis is incentivized to disappear him, he can. And the plot and the danger posed to Victor escalates is great. Well, that sentence doesn't make sense, but does escalate sort of very cleverly and very well. If you will, throughout the movie. So the plot is interesting because initially, like, oh, Nazi dude, they're obviously occupying France here. They're welcomed in the scene where we are first introduced to, his name starts with S, but I don't remember it now. The Nazi, the highest ranking Nazi in the movie. The Frenchmen welcome him and they're like completely subservient and things like that. Well, I guess not completely because they don't necessarily have to. I guess. Because France has been, obviously, this is a big plot point in the movie when Paris is taken, but France has been is occupied by the Nazis right now. Are they occupied until, like, the end of the war? Like, I guess the Russians push them all the way back to Moscow, and that's where Hitler kills himself. But I don't know when France is, like, freed. But nonetheless, in 41, I believe, is when France is taken. Well, actually, it probably isn't. Hold on, let's just quickly Google this one too. When did the Germans take France? It's definitely not 41 because that's when the movie is set. May of 40. Okay. They've been apart for about a year. Okay. I thought it was 2 years, but must have been wrong. Anyway, very early into the war. It's still 5 years of war after that. I guess I should just Google, when is France liberated? In World War II. In 44 to 45, so I guess it did take the whole time. Crazy stuff. Because obviously, I've seen Inglourious Bastards. France is occupied during that too. I don't know what year that is set. It's probably in like 40 or something because they end the war at the end of that movie in very different circumstances, but nonetheless. History lesson and a film history lesson, with me looking up dates in this one. You're all welcome. So the Nazis don't seem to have full control, but it seems if Louis doesn't do what they want, they could make it a problem for him in the future and might send more Nazis over to sort of, because they do call it unoccupied France. Now, obviously, Morocco here is in northern Africa. It's like a France settlement. They have colonized it, I guess, because they did colonize a lot of just Africa in general, I think, though maybe just specifically Northern Africa. My history isn't perfect, all right? Obviously, the French Empire was a thing. And so, yeah, it seems like maybe they can't just do what they want, because obviously, I guess, there are only a limited number of Nazis, and they can't just send, like, armies into Morocco where there is assumedly not a lot of fighting happening and just have them occupy Casablanca, which is just sort of a port city. It seems to be run by the French, but they're sort of beholden, in a general sense, to Nazis, even if they're not around. Nonetheless, they seemingly can't just like capture Victor immediately and then shoot him and be like, Lamount, now we're leaving. And this danger sort of escalates because they are sort of introduced in the bar initially. The Nazi to Victor. What's his last name? We'll just call him Victor. Laszlo? Or Salsagar. I think it's Laszlo. I don't know where I'm getting Salsagar from. But yeah, they're just introduced to each other, and Victor doesn't like immediately run and hide or anything, because it even says like, oh, I'm on French soil, so you sort of aren't supposed to be able to do anything. But as this escalates, that's like their first meeting scene. It's sort of tense, and And then the next scene is obviously them and the meeting the next day, and they sort of say, well, this Ngati fella is now dead, but we're still deciding whether or not it was a suicide or if he got shot trying to escape, when clearly he didn't do either and he was just killed. Where it's sort of like the tacit threat from Louis that we can make you disappear if you make yourself a problem for us. And then it sort of escalates where after the national anthem off that happens, he's sort of directly threatened, and then it becomes sort of he will die if we don't get out of here, as Ilsa says to Rick later on. So it all generally escalates, and it feels very natural, and the tension is obviously always underneath. It's very well done. There was something I wanted... obviously another big thing that I probably should have talked about in the intro, and probably would have if I did my notes correctly. This is obviously a World War II movie in the middle of, that's created in the middle of the war. So it's not like a reflecting piece on the war. There's still a lot to be determined to happen. The Germans could have won the war after this. I think that's a deeply fascinating thing, especially like a betrayal of Nazis. Now, I guess I had assumed that the wider world didn't know about the concentration camps until the end of the war. Like, I thought the story was like the Russians were going through like the eastern part of what had become the German Empire and sort of German-occupied Western Europe, and they slowly like discovered the concentration camps. Maybe they just slowly discovered like the death camps, and I guess concentration camp just means like you're collecting a bunch of people in an area. Not to say justice and if it's okay or whatever, but maybe they might not have been killing them yet, or it might not have been widely known that they're killing them yet. Because Victor Laszlo is not Jewish, he's Czechoslovak, he's a Czech, no, because Czech is a different place, right? He's Czechoslovakian. I said it, I don't have to say it again. And I know that those were another like race of people, I guess, that the Germans hated a lot. I don't know if they knew about the Jewish thing specifically yet. I don't know. He says it in his book, I'm pretty sure, and the book came out like 10 years before the movie is set. I don't know. I'm not, I'm not a history professor out here, but nonetheless, he's escaped. And they can't necessarily do anything about it, but they will on the down low. And the tension as it escalates is very clever in that regard. That was my tension point. I guess we'll talk about characterization before we get into the specific, because I wanted to go into sort of the early romance stuff and the going into the flashback and the tension and the build-up and of them meeting and things like that. I nearly transitioned into talking about that, but we'll talk about that after the fact. I also don't think this video will be as long as the blonde one, by the way, because to say that there's not as much to talk about, again, sounds like a diss, but I did not intend it that way, but I guess it's true. The characterization is another, like, very direct appeal of the movie. It is pretty fucking incredible. And the way they handle screen time and sort of making everybody that works in the bar likable, like Carl the waiter, he has his own sort of personality and I don't know, he's just sort of this jovial fat man running around waiting people. He's clever, he's quick. The cute scene where he drinks with the one couple that's finally leaving the next day or whatever, and at the end they have bad English, so it's sort of funny because they're like, oh, we are practicing English so we'll fit right in, and he sort of has a mocking grin, but he also knew that they would offer him a drink, so he had already brought the drink and the glass and everything. It's just clever. And then he's later also going to the resistance movements and with Laszlo and there, so they sort of escape together. It's all cute. Sasha the bartender, who seems to harass the girls as he comes in an old school likable way, which is potentially problematic. Yvonne, the sort of the I guess the side girl in the movie. Now we're getting problematic, but I just wrote it down as the other girl here. That Rick is clearly sleeping with at the beginning, but doesn't care for much because he can't care anymore, guys, because his heart is broken. It's a real thing. Initially, because I didn't know what Ilsa looked like, I didn't know the name of the main girl, and initially when she's shown, and obviously going in, you'll know this is a romance movie, so I think it is sort of a fake out, where there's this very pretty girl waiting for him, and you're like, oh, is this the love interest girl? But she's not. But I was talking about Sasha characterization first, where he's like, he keeps saying that he loves her and all these things, but then he defaults like, but he pays me, and it's just cute. And even when he's told to come right back after dropping her off, like, don't go in and try and fuck her, and all of it's so witty and clever and cute, even if it does have problematic implications for our contemporaneous times. Nonetheless, and then later when Rick helps the younger couple, he like kisses him on the cheek, and Rick like sort of whacks him and goes, "You crazy Russian" or whatever. It's all cute. They feel like a cute little family, and they even all get nice resolutions at the end when Rick sells the bar to Ferrari, who is the owner of the other big bar in town, the Blue Parrot. I remember everything. It might not be Parrot. I'm insecure after I've boasted that it might not be Parrot. I think it is though. I'm pretty sure it was Blue. And Rick goes there later. Not really later in the movie, sort of halfway through. So we do see it. Nonetheless, and they all get happy endings is what I was saying, because they're all going to stay on employed under the Ferrari dude, who seems like an alright bloke, even if he is a black market dealer. I guess Yvonne, and she also gets a bunch of scenes which are cute. Because initially, obviously, she's wanting of Rick, and she's like, "Oh, what a fool I was to fall for a man like you," or whatever. She leaves, and it's sort of like a tragic drunk girl. It's endearing. And then later she comes back, and she's like on the arm of one of the Nazi soldiers. And Rick has a line like, "It looks like Yvonne's gone over to the enemy," or whatever, and it's cute. But clearly she's a little opportunistic. But then later, when they're singing the French national anthem, she's like singing and crying, and it's sort of like her flip-floppiness is cute and endearing, where she was sort of clearly not actually interested in Nazi dude, just sort of wanted to hang out with people who were getting drinks for free and that would get her drinks and pay for her drinks and things like that. But later, she's actually singing the French. I assume that's the French national anthem. I'm pretty sure it is. They are in France and everything. And they make a big thing of the conflict of the French and German soldiers in the bar and things like that. But yeah, it's a cute. I think that's her last scene. It's a cute resolution of a character that she's singing there. Didn't have to give her all those scenes. Could have had her just be sort of one note, but it fleshes her out a little bit, gives her a bit more complexity, and it's cute. Ungati at the beginning has a lot of characterization really quickly. I feel like I talked about this in my Boardwalk Empire videos, where I was like, every character sort of performatively, or as it's performed, is like unbelievably great, where Mickey Doyle has like and they're all like accents you can place that you've heard in other things of like the time of like the 20s, like how Mickey Doyle talks and how Nucky talks, and I don't know, there are other examples of basically every character in that show where they're like, I don't know, it's like a specific accent and a specific like personality that you can like place as sort of like the caricature it's become over time. And Gotti is a character like that, where it's like, I know this little fella. Like, not that I recognize the actor or that I know the character, but like, I've met people just like this. And also it's very cute, especially when you zoom out on the lens of like, I knew kids that were like that when I was in school. And to be like, man, there's like, this is another one of my new talking points, that there's like 300 types of people in the world. And everybody is like one of them. And obviously I don't think I'm one of them. But that's because I'm probably one of them. But like, you can place and you meet new people, and you're like, oh, you're just like that person. And again, you never remember the exact person they're like, but you sort of remember their archetype. And obviously it's interesting that these archetypes, there seems to have only ever have been 300 people, and that people have always been the same, because you're like, the kid that I knew in school that acted just like this dude probably wasn't influenced by Casablanca the movie, though it could have been a knock-on effect of like down the family tree it was affected, and people around him were affected by this betrayal or something. And maybe this personality type comes from this one character, but it seems like it's just sort of types of people seem to emerge in social situations. But Ngati has a bunch of cute lines at the beginning where it's like the because you despise me, you're the only person I trust, which is another line, or another plot point, I guess, that I feel like I've seen a million times in a million different things. Yeah, and everything about him, and him sort of running to Rick for help at the end, as he's trying to escape and things. Again, a lot of fleshing out of his character early on. Well done on the characterization. I have Sam down here as well. The Knock on Wood performance at the beginning. All of his musical numbers are great. Obviously, we'll talk about as time goes by. As time goes by. Get it? We'll talk about it in a minute. But him sort of being violently loyal, I guess not violently, deathly loyal, I guess not deathly. He's very loyal to Rick. In potentially problematic aspects because of obviously the race aspect and the fact that Rick is the American character. And it's brought up at the beginning, like, I don't like to buy and sell human beings and things like that when Ferrari tries to get Sam to work for him. So there might be some slavery undertones here. They are, 90 years removed in America when this movie comes out. It's interesting also Rick's characterization that he is very nice to Sam, and Sam is maybe portrayed a little bit as a black caricature of sort of the jovial singer or whatever. But I could see, I was just having flashbacks again, everything has to be viewed contemporaneously. I'm like, if they did a period piece about the 1940s and had the white character be nice to the black character, I feel like some people would be calling it woke. And it's cute in like a 1942 movie. It could be genuine, I guess, and it would sort of be a contradiction to those people's arguments. To bring up Mad Men again, I used to think it was very convenient, especially in the very first scene of Mad Men, where it sort of we're surrounded by racists, and this is in the 60s, so this is like 20 years after this. When does segregation end formally in America? It is in the 60s, right? So this is still in a segregated world where racist attitudes were very normalized, but Rick doesn't have any of them. And the portrayal of him as having none of them could have been seen as sort of a way that might throw off audiences, but nonetheless, the creators opted to do that, because obviously you have to be cognizant of how a contemporaneous crowd, the contemporaneous crowd of 1942 would react to sort of make sure that Rick is likable in the way he can be likable, because he's a bit grey in this movie. That's actually the whole point of the movie, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting that like they had enough confidence, seemingly in the American public, not being racist, to have him be nice to Sam, and still be a likable main character, which is interesting. Especially in sort of recontextualizing your mindset of what sort of the American attitude, or just, I guess, any attitudes were about race at that time. I was getting back to a point that I've completely forgotten, though. The woke stuff and the Mad Men stuff. Because in the first episode of Mad Men, in the very first scene in the bar, Don is very nice and talks to the black waiter a lot, and the white waiter comes over and says, "Is Sam bothering you?" or whatever, and there's a lot of racist implications there. And obviously there are a lot of racist implications in Mad Men. And it was like, it's sort of convenient that like Don, who is problematic in some regards, is not racist, because that would probably, in the opposite way of sort of I was speculating for 1942 audiences, 2007 audiences, if Don was outrightly racist, would probably make him, that would be like, we're done, we can't like Don, especially when this is the first episode of the first scene of the first episode is deeply problematic. So it's sort of like convenient that Don is not racist, and I thought about that a little bit if it's sort of inauthentic or unrealistic. But they go through painstaking efforts to justify Don's lack of racism, I think. And even with Roger, who is very explicitly racist and does blackface in an episode in Mad Men, and does sort of the caricature and the performance and everything, I feel like most people would still say that Roger is likable despite that. But that is in like season 3, so Roger's already built up a bit of goodwill and things like that. Roger is also very outwardly racist to the Japanese in an episode in season 4 or 5 too. Roger is supposed to be lovably problematic, I guess. But yeah, nonetheless, doing that in season 3 versus doing that in season 1, and the first scene of season 1 is very different things. But also, Mad Men is so good because Pete, who is kind of a villainous character, at least initially, and sort of not the most gracious of heroes throughout the show, is also strikingly anti-racist. There's that one shot when Roger is doing the blackface at his wedding, where it's like Don on one end of the group, and it's like a massive group of people, and like Betty is laughing at it because Betty's evil. And on the other end is Pete, and Pete and Don are the only people that are like noticeably uncomfortable. And it's sort of a great little bit of characterization that Pete, who is sort of this villainous dude, is like strikingly anti-racist, and even anti-racist, not just not racist, because he also has that talk with Harry way later on where he calls Harry out for not mourning Martin Luther King enough. And and it's just so cute that Pete is the character they decided to make the anti-racist. So it's sort of like Madman's clever at this and not necessarily afraid of this. But nonetheless, him being very nice to Sam is sort of interesting from a historical context. And obviously, contemporaneously to 2022, it endears Rick to us as well. Then we have Ferrari, who is sort of the almost soft-spoken. I think he might be native Moroccan because I think he wears like the traditional hats and stuff like that. Another big point in the movie is that Casablanca has become a massive melting pot. There are like Asian characters around. There are Germans. There are Czechoslovakians. There are I said it all right that time. Frenchmen around, right? Because obviously the French colonized it, so there are the French and the native people there, but now there's also a million refugees coming in to try and get to Lisbon. Lisbon is apparently in Portugal. I looked that up. So I guess they're flying back up into Europe to then fly to America, because I guess Portugal was on the Allies side. I actually don't know. I don't know what Spain or Portugal were doing in World War II. We do get talks of a previous Spanish conflict against fascists, though, that Rick fought in 36, and then in 35 he was running guns to Ethiopia. I'm great with these numbers, fellas. Nonetheless, it's like a melting pot. There are so much diversity in this movie. Another thing that could have been called out contemporaneously by like a critical drinker video or something. It's just funny that like in 1942 they were doing this, and it feels genuine. Nonetheless, Ferrari, he's cool too. I like him. Louis is more of a main character than the other ones I've mentioned now, but obviously his characterization. He's very witty and very clever, and similarly problematic in sort of a Roger-esque way, if we're comparing everything to Mad Men. Because he is sort of lovable and jovial in some sense, but he's also clever, but he's also like indentured? He's entrenched in sort of these problematic power structures where he's clearly preying on women a little bit, probably more than a little bit. And it's sort of like gross, and it's like the biggest, and again, this is like a contemporaneous thing, because I don't know how the 1942 audience would react to this if they thought it was funny, but the line he has later after Rick sort of screws him out of getting what he wants with the one young woman in the couple, he says like, "Oh, tomorrow I'm going to bring in a breathtaking blonde, and it'll make me very happy if she loses." And I have watched a few Casablanca reactions on YouTube because I'm bad, and every time that line happens, everybody goes, "Ugh." But at the end, he's sort of redeemed, and it seems to have gone on a similar character arc to Rick, where he's sort of going to rejoin the war as not just a bystander who's okay with anything, but sort of join in on in trying to fight against the Nazis. But yeah, so I got some redemption in the end. Other than that, Louis is pretty likable just through his wit and stuff like that throughout the movie. Everyone is so interesting as we are introduced to Rick, is how I end this note. And it is those, because obviously we have the opening stuff, and there is the pickpocket character that never comes into play in anything. He's just sort of like a reoccurring, like, vultures everywhere as he's stealing the wallet, and it's a clever gag, and it happens twice. And even Carl one time has to check himself. I was waiting for him to come back into the movie. Initially, I thought he was Ngati, and I thought that was the same dude. But obviously, after Ngati's dead, he shows back up. But he's just sort of there to give exposition at the beginning, I guess. But nonetheless, what a wacky character. With a lot of personality, who's only in like 2 scenes. I feel like there are other ones. Like there's like the Italian and Frenchman talking where the Italian doesn't get to speak at all, and they're in a few scenes. There are little reoccurring background characters. A lot of attention to detail in this movie, I guess. But yes, those after that initial, like the very initial introduction, the first shot though of like the globe where like all the mountains are dotted in, that was fucking sick. It looked cool, and and sort of the voiceover, that's all cute. And on the map, great stuff. And then obviously there's like the round up the usual suspects meme that comes back at the end, which is another one of those lines that everybody's heard and quoted before. Yes, and then eventually we are introduced to Rick's, and that's like the great part of the movie. Those like first 20 or like maybe 20 to 30 minutes of because it doesn't end until Laszlo and Ilsa leave, but we're sort of being introduced to all these characters, getting these shots of the set in the bar and Sam singing and stuff like that, and we're meeting all these little characters, and there's like a jeweler with like diamonds and stuff like that, and it's just all the quirky little things that are happening in the bar that are really cute, and flesh it all out. It's great. I guess in talking about that, we'll talk about the Ilsa Rick sort of introduction stuff, because all the other stuff is sort of after that in my notes here. So this is all built up. The way they build up to Rick specifically is cool too. You hear a lot about him before you see him, and then there's sort of, you see him sign something, and then the reveal shot of what he looks like. He's sitting over like a chessboard, playing against no one, it seems, which is probably a metaphor for America's stance in the war at that time, or his stance on sort of the conflict brewing in Casablanca, that is supposed to be an allegory for America being non-interventionalist for the first few years of the war before doing the right thing and getting involved, as the message of the movie would have it. But nonetheless, his introduction is cool. And obviously before that we were introduced to Sam, and he's singing and stuff. And then Laszlo is also talked about before he shows up, and then he says to the waiter, like, I had a reservation for Victor Laszlo, so now we know it's him, and he's with the girl. And you're probably like, this girl is very pretty, she is probably the main girl after the fake out. And sort of on an initial viewing, sort of the game that's played with the tension and what we know and what's implied is like brilliant. This is probably again like my favorite part of the movie. Because initially that sets you off, you're like, all right, paying attention, this is the important guy, but he has a girl, and this girl is very pretty, and this is a love story, so it's her. Now this is interesting because obviously already there's a conflict. She's got a boyfriend, and who we'll come to learn is her husband, and always was her husband. Can you believe it? So yeah, there's already conflict here. And obviously Laszlo is this war hero, and it sort of is, we're positioned behind Rick, but Laszlo is like the much better dude, and probably the much better dude for her, so there's sort of that conflict and that hypocrisy that's inbuilt into you of like, man, I want Rick to succeed here because he's our boy, but like, this isn't really what's right. And obviously the whole movie is about duty or love or what is right, and what are the lives of three measly people don't amount to as much or amount to much in this crazy world or whatever, and there are bigger things to fight for than a love story and things like that. Obviously that's the whole thematic girth of the movie. The yawns, they're going to be mainstay because I usually record these at nights with Movie Night with Mr. Entertainment. Nonetheless, where were we up to? Where were we up to? Oh, we were talking about the tension, what we know, we don't know. So initially you're like, girl, she's going to be main girl. Oh no, she's got a boyfriend. She's walking in. And there's an added bit of tension because obviously everybody's looking for this dude, and you assume that as soon as the Nazi dude finds out he's there, he's going to grab him immediately. So there's also an initial danger of like, get out of here. Then they walk past Sam, and Sam notices, and you're like, And it doesn't feel like initially that he just notices that it's Victor Laszlo walking in. It seems like he looks at the girl and does sort of the wary look. Now, I don't know if she looks at him there, though she does eventually notice that it's Sam. So obviously you can sort of tell where things are going, so you're like, oh, I want to know more. And how it develops from there is very clever. She walks in and Sam recognizes her, and the tension only builds from there. Everybody's watching Victor as they walk in. And obviously she has the line like, Victor, everybody's looking at us, I don't like this, we're in danger. Yeah, but there is that tension that's sort of the tension in the room for the characters, but also the audience tension is more so, this girl is going to be important, I want to know more. And then she sort of asks, because Louis comes over, and she asks about Sam, and he says that it's Sam, so she's sort of confirming that it is the Sam she knew in Paris. And then she starts questioning about Rick and things like that, and you're like, And it's clear that because she says, I think I knew Sam back in the day, so there's at least a connection there. And this builds into, obviously, the connection with Rick and Louis has the line, if I were a woman, I should be in love with Rick, and things like that. It's cute. And then the other musician plays, who's like a woman. She does a good performance. But this means Sam isn't occupied, so Ilsa asks for Sam to come over. And then it's very direct. I think I talked about this before, but it's very direct in addressing things. Like, they sort of don't beat around the bush, where in retrospect it doesn't make sense, which I see some mystery things doing that. I feel like I remember DBZ doing that, where it was like, these characters shouldn't have acted like this if they were both doing this, which we are recontextualizing that was happening in that scene. I feel like Naruto has moments like that too, where it's like, these two characters probably should have been saying more than they were saying to each other, and it feels like, oh no, did we just invent this later? Or even worse, were we not doing it just to make it easier for the audience to not pick up on anything, which sort of harms the consistency of it, I guess consistency is the word, the continuity of it, I guess. But no, they immediately start talking about things, and it's just, the tension is building. It's so great. Again, this is all a reaction meme, because I always complain in everything about in DBZ and then in Game of Thrones Season 8, where it sort of builds up to where you want to see the reactions of these characters interacting again, or them finding out something. And Casablanca hits on every reaction you want to see, and it's great. Rather than like cutting away or beating around the bush or undermining it because it's not important, because it's not plot important. But it's fucking sick, and I love it. But yes, Sam goes over to Ilsa, and they notice each other. And Ilsa in this interaction with Sam, it's so cute, because she's smiling through everything. And Sam is clearly not smiling and is a little uncomfortable with it all and is a little scared for Rick, because he just cares so much about him. How nice. But yeah, her, like, I don't know, there's something relatable to real life about the reunion stuff. I don't know, there's just so much energy there that's so captivating, and I don't know how to describe it as I'm thinking about it now. Just her smiling through it all. Like, the smiling plus the looking away kind of thing, and not looking directly at each other, and the drinking thing, and sort of the hesitancy, but like, it's sort of like a logical hesitancy of like, and she'll even say this later, like, oh, I shouldn't have come here if I knew you were here. But sort of the emotional want takes over, and it's like, oh, I do want to interact here. I do want to say hi, even if it would be easier for everybody potentially if I didn't do anything. It's just sort of a drive that she has to do it, and like, she can't wipe the smile off her face. It's so cute. I just have, their talk is incredible as a note here. She wants to go back. She sees through his lies easily, because he starts contradicting himself very quickly. He's clearly very nervous. Everything about this scene is fucking perfect. But yes, you used to be a much better liar, Sam. The way she says Sam in the scene is also... Her acting in this scene particularly is so good. The way she says play it, obviously later, is like iconic, and it's so good for whatever reason. It's the exact perfect syllable pronunciation. It's the exact perfect verbalization. It's great stuff. Yeah, with that and with this. I don't know. And the way she speaks, obviously, she has like the female accent of the time, of that sort of way people talk, and I don't know. It's very, I like it. It's good to the ears, I guess. And then she asks him, and the play line, I kind of just talked about it, but it's so good. The way she says it and play as time goes by. I know. The way they talk in this movie gives you the jitters, you know? Oh, and then she, like, and Sam's like, oh, I don't remember it. I don't know it. I don't want to sing it, and things like that. And her humming it doesn't sound like this song. Now, it probably does, just because I'm musically uneducated in every degree. Now, obviously, this is the famous song from the movie that I feel like most people know. I looked it up because I was like, was this song written for the movie? But no, it was originally came out in 1931 or something, covered by a woman. I listened to the Frank Sinatra version, was okay. The Nancy Sinatra version, though, I think is probably better. I don't know if it's better than the Sam version, though. I'm coming to the conclusion that Nancy Sinatra might just be better than Frank Sinatra in general. Like, you only live twice. I guess My Way is better than... I guess My Way is like the best song ever, so Lamau. But I don't know. Nancy Sinatra, good at singing. I also, You Only Live Twice, a song played at the end of a Mad Men episode. That's how I know about it. My Way also played in a Mad Men episode. Everything comes back to Mad Men, it seems. But nonetheless, as time goes by, her humming it here. It sounds like something else. There are things in music. This sort of relates to my pattern recognition thing with people, where I'm like, oh, there's like 300 people in the world. I also think that there's like 300 songs in the world, or 300 melodies or something. And you hear things, and you're like, man, I know that from someplace, that exact tune, or that reminds me of something, but you can never place it. And there are sort of like, and you'll hear it in newer music, and you'll be like, no, this melody, I don't even know if melody is the right word. I don't know what the difference between a melody, a beat, harmony, and any of these things are. Completely musically uneducated. At least technically. Not technically as I'm technically uneducated, but lack of education in the technicalities. But nonetheless. And because I'll hear like new songs that come out, and I'll be like, man, this has such a similar sound to like something I've seen, and because this came out in 2019, I know I remember hearing this when I was like 7 or something. Obviously, a bunch of songs probably have similar melodies, and I'm showing my lack of music education here. But the way she hums it, like, I don't want to try and hum, but it sounds like something else, and it sounds like sort of this iconic melody that I recognize in a bunch of like super dramatic, super famous songs. And I don't know, the specific sound, and this has happened with sort of, again, I'm going to use the word melodies, these little melodies before, where you sort of get this feeling of, it's like a feeling of, like, not formality, but formation. It's like, this is a formational sound of sort of existence almost. It's like, this feels like reverting to, it's not just like nostalgia at all. It's like, this feels like reverting to like when you're 7 and it's like the perfect sound. How do we explain this? It's sort of like, it feels like one of the 3 great sounds or something. I don't know. It's like, there's like things that sound good, and I think it's like an objective thing in your head where it's like, oh, this is like objective. Like, this is one of the objective great melodies or something. And you're like, man, I don't know, the way she does it. Put a pinpoint on this. I'm going to think about this more, because I have been thinking about this more increasingly as I've noticed it happening. Someday I'll be able to explain it, and I'll put it in a video. Just like when I figure out how to express the appeal of Chainsaw Man. Now we're bringing up Chainsaw Man and Casablanca movie review. We can do it all here. We've done it all. Nonetheless, he sings it she hums it. I have bit by bit notes here, and I don't want to miss a part. So she hums it, and I just described it here as particularly poignant in my notes. Obviously, this is a big... Now, again, thinking about this in 1942 context, it's like, how long have they had recorded music? Is this like a new phenomenon where we're like expressing it for the first time? But obviously, specific songs, usually specific love songs, will transport you back to previous encounters, previous relationships, and things like this. This is why every song is like a love song, or every song is a breakup song, because it feels so good to remember sort of the melancholic heartbreak. I have a song like this. I'm sure everybody does. I'm sure for multiple, like, as you grow older and you have multiple different relationships, I'm sure there are multiple different songs. And it's just sort of, whenever it'll randomly come on when you're in the shower or something, and it'll take you back. Which is what happens here, and you can see it on her face, because they sort of hold on her face as Sam starts singing. And there's turmoil and a want to go back and nostalgia and everything on her face. Very well acted. Just briefly, because I won't remember to bring it up later, in the take video also, they talk about the lighting of the shots, and how Rick has always got the film noir lighting of half of his face is in black, half of his face is in white most of the time. Ilsa has like this glow because she's the pretty girl, and like they make her eyes glow in scenes by like reflecting light off of it. And Victor Laszlo is always in like complete light because he's fighting the good fight here. That was a cute little point. that I didn't notice, but in retrospect made a lot of sense after I watched the take video. It came to mind then. But nonetheless, talking about the song taking you back, it's always car seat headrest songs with me. Can you fucking believe that shit? Not quite as time goes by, but just I feel like that melancholic feeling is so relatable, and even if you like, you'll project your own experiences onto this scene in the movie, and it sort of gives the song inherently that weight and an inherent relatability. There's something specifically about music too, where it's more visceral in a sense than sort of a film or a TV show or an animated piece or a game or something. There's just something. It's sort of I guess it is literally the music, even removed from the lyrics. So the lyrics obviously add to it. It's all sound at the end of the day. There's something easier. It's like an easier connection, I think, and it's easier to elicit an emotion, right? That's why, yeah, there's a bunch of dramatic, like, head turns in this movie, which do seem a little corny by today's standards, but it's like so cool that, like, oh, it's corny because of movies like this, and it didn't take me out at all. But yeah, head turn, dramatic cue, to let you know that it's a dramatic moment and to be invested. So music can sort of set tone. There's also a transcendent quality to music where I feel like it's easier for music to have you transcending to sort of like this apex of experience, this experiential, you know the word I'm looking for, the experiential apex. Sometimes you just listen to Comfortably Numb, right? It lulls you in for the first 3 minutes, then it hits the guitar solo, and then you're gone. You've transcended. You're up in the clouds. You've become, well, I guess you haven't become comfortably numb, but that would have been a cute way to end that. Something particularly about music that will teleport you back to places easily. And it sort of does the meme miscellaneous insert shot thing with her, where it's sort of like it hovers on her face and you see the emotion, but it's sort of, you glaze over and are more listening than watching. And it's fucking sweet, bro. Rick then comes in, and obviously the implication, though it hasn't been set out right yet, is obviously this is their song. And so when he comes in and you sort of see him walk in, and he starts to get trepidatious as he starts hearing it, you sort of, it's like, oh, it's such an anticipation moment of like, oh, he hears it, and you see on his face that he hears it, and you're like, oh, how's he going to react? What's happening? And just the tension. And him sort of rushing over, because he does his normal, like, cool Rick walk in, and then he starts walking over faster because he wants to go over to Sam because he can hear Sam playing it, though he doesn't see Ilsa until he gets over there. But sort of as he starts walking faster, it's sort of a break of his, because I think before this we've had this scene where Louis is like, oh, I suspect rather that you're a sentimentalist at heart, and so this is sort of one of the initial cracks in sort of the veneer of Rick, and him rushing over, just great stuff. And then obviously he makes it over there and he says, Sam, I thought I told you never to play that again. So it's sort of like confirmation that it's their song. And then he sort of looks over, and then dramatic cue, they see each other, and it's just such a visceral, great payoff moment. And it's like, so great. And then to add to the tension, to not give it all away initially, they actually don't, they just sort of look at each other, and then Louis and Laszlo, who are over at the bar, come back over. And even cooler is them like talking to each other, but not directly, and while other people are around. So they can't be direct with each other, but sort of they are hinting at each other the things they want to say. And again, we built up that Rick doesn't like to drink with customers and all this stuff before this. To have the payoff here where he does, and he even takes the bill and doesn't make them pay and things like that. And Louis is there to react to the whole thing and be like, oh, a precedent is being broken today. And it is very cute, and sort of you're sort of living vicariously through him. He's saying the things that you're noticing, and if you didn't notice them, he'll notice them for you. Thus is the strength of exposition. But yeah, the things they say there is sort of and like the little details even in this scene are so great, where he says because the first thing he says is like, hello, Rick, and then he says, hello, Isa, right? Isla? Why am I forgetting her name now? I said it so confidently earlier correctly. But this is as Louis goes to introduce them, but they both interrupt him, and it's like so they know each other. And then Louis goes to turn to Victor and says, well, then you must also already know, and then Rick cuts him off and introduces himself to Victor, so it's like, no, they don't know, Victor and him don't know each other, and by extension they know the girl, but Rick and the girl know each other, and it's sort of just it fills in exposition, because you might be curious whether or not he knows Victor as well, and what the details are surrounding this mysterious love story so far. But yeah, it's just so good, and they build up to the line like the last time we saw each other was in this place, and it was the day the Germans marched in, not an easy day to forget or something. And then he's like, the Germans wore grey, you wore blue, and it's like obviously on the surface level of we're just having a talk about how we platonically used to know each other. The you wore blue part is just sort of the romance line, but it's subtle enough to be thrown in. The way Victor is positioned in these scenes, it's sort of like, does he not understand what's going on here? But then it's sort of made evident later on that he does. He's just not the insecure type to like freak out immediately. And obviously the end. That's obviously the implication when Rick tells him what happened last night, and he again doesn't freak out or anything. Is more emotionally mature than that. And it reflects well on him again, since he is like the most virtuous fella around, fighting the good fight and everything. So them not saying each other until people are around builds the tension brilliantly. The German line, you hear your heart sinks when Victor wants them to leave. Yes, even on the reactions when obviously I know what's happened. When Victor like cuts off the scene where it's just starting to get really, really good, when he's like, oh, it's late. I don't know, there's like a deep entrenched like feeling where you're like, oh no. And it's very cute that the movie had you there. I know it might be like when you're having fun at some place and your mum says, you got 5 more minutes or something until we leave, and your heart sinks and you get mad. It's like reminiscent of that feeling when he's like, it is getting late, we gotta leave, and it's like, no, what? It just has you. The movie has you in the palm of its hand throughout this. It's got your heart on a string, got a ball on the string. That's the football reference. He's got the ball on a string when he's kicking it well. That's what I was going for there. Nonetheless. But then obviously it's them walking out, and I think Victor briefly says like, who is this Rick fellow or whatever? Seems a weird type or something. And they get in a cab, but then we cut to later and it's Rick alone drinking, and the veneer is completely gone here. He's like breaking down, having seen her. And we get that scene with Sam, and it's cute, and he wants the song to be played for him too. And it all plays in, and I think that's when we get the gin joint line. Just great stuff, you know? But I have the point here, the Red Letter Media point about build-ups and payoffs being all that matters. Those two will talk about that all the time on Half in the Bag, about how it's the little build-ups and payoffs that really sort of satisfy an audience. And it's true, bro. It's true, and the movie does it exceptionally well. And then we immediately go into the love montage flashback. That's super cute. So it is sort of answering the question immediately. And I know the way it cuts away and then cuts back, and then you do get it's just so good. The curiosity factor, the tension behind the curiosity factor, they balance it exceptionally. Drink break. And then initially we do get the scene where she comes to him, but he's all mean to her. Implies that she's a whore by saying like, were there others in between, or you're not the type to tell. His mind is wandering with jealousy, which is reflected in the song. There's a line about that. And even later she'll be like, I could have told the Rick in Paris, he would have understood, but you looked at me last night with such hatred. It's just like good stuff. I don't want to go through the rest of the movie like bit by bit, but that's like my favorite section of the movie, and sort of highlights why I think it was so effective and so good. Give it 5 stars. What are we doing here? I guess this is where we can talk, because we're talking about the love story right now. There are little bits of the love story that they don't fall flat. They fall short of sort of the greatness of the rest of the movie, I think, and that's why maybe we aren't going to give it the rest of the half star. There's the Paris flashback is good. And this isn't another point where I'm going like, we had to watch them have sex on screen or whatever in my House of the Dragon talking point. That's all handled really well. It's like because even the flashback stuff is all really good. The being left at the station in the rain, obviously great motif, great trope. I assume this is what created it. Iconic, sad, the note. It's all great, exceptional stuff. I think the line, "He's looking at you, kid," is a little weird because obviously he is older than her, and obviously that might be slightly problematic nowadays. But even he says that earlier on in the scene in the bar at night when she sneaks in. This is the one earlier, not the one later. Where he's like, "I've heard this story before about a young girl who meets a man or whatever," and it's sort of like it seems like girls when they're like 22 get hitched up with like a 33-year-old, and or maybe even younger, because I feel like a lot of the girls I went to high school with I've seen go through this phase where it's sort of like they're 20 or 21 and they like the allure of being with like a like even like a 28-year-old or a 33-year-old or something, where it sort of helps them feel that they're mature, but they always end up going back to like one of their contemporaries to get married, and those relationships almost always fizzle out. He seems to implicate that early on, where he's like, yeah, this story happens all the time. I was a fool to think it would last or whatever. So that all works. And He's Looking at You sort of plays into that. I don't know. He's Looking at You, kid is just a little, I don't know. It doesn't work for me. It's like a little weird. And so it affected my view, I think, a little bit. Also, them getting back together felt a little bit, I hate the R word. I'm not going to say the R word. It felt a little rushed in the scene where sort of like obviously the juxtaposition of them going from her trying to shoot him to them kissing. Now, I love all that stuff. It's not like me calling it tone or whiplash and that you can't go from having her shoot him to kiss him. That doesn't make any sense. Like the juxtaposition isn't the whole point. There's just sort of like I don't know if I buy her relenting so quickly, or I don't know. There's something a little bit off there that I can't quite place my little finger on. But generally, like, everything after that works. Like, the scene where she's like, "Oh, I don't want to think anymore. You got to think for all of us," or whatever. Like, that stuff afterwards, I buy all that stuff. And her saying that she was still in love with him, I buy all that stuff too. There's just something slightly about it that's slightly off. Like, the ending still works. I'm still like, oh, we still want them to end up together, but obviously they're not. There's a bittersweet aspect to the ending and everything like that. That all still works. Like, the movie doesn't fall down, but there is, I guess it might just be whenever he says, like, "He's looking at you, kid." Maybe I just don't like that line. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe that's the half the star minus. I feel like there was something else, though, that I am forgetting. About why it felt a little off to me. Fuck it, I can't remember right now. It might jump back to me eventually. Yeah, alright, I'll just bet on it jumping back to me when we talk about something else. But there is something slightly off on the romance angle. In some of those scenes, it might just be that line. Anyway, what else do we have to say? We talked about the characterization stuff. I guess overall the Rick's arc in the movie is sort of deep down he has a golden heart, and it comes back to the forefront towards the end when he is self-sacrificial, because throughout Ferrari even says to him directly, like, isolationism isolationism, I said it sometimes right throughout this recording session, is no longer like practical or something. And he's sort of had this retreat. He's had this mourning period of pretending that he only cares about himself, but repeatedly throughout the movie, and obviously epitomized in the ending is him coming back to sort of the fight and coming out of his mourning process, I guess. But even like the little aspects of it are shown from the very beginning, right? Like he hates the Germans initially, and that's endearing because he doesn't let that one German dude into like the gambling section. And he's like, "You're lucky the bar's open to you," or whatever. And then he's impressed when Ugarte says that when he realizes that Ugarte killed the Germans to get the passes and stuff like that. Obviously later too, when he's nice to his employees, obviously, if he was just trying to serve himself, he wouldn't want to keep them all on salary after he gets closed down later on. And obviously he helps the younger couple. And obviously her monologue is very applicable to his situation, where it's like, well, actually, I guess it's more applicable to her and Victor's situation, where she's like, basically the implication is if she fucks Louis will give them the passports, or potentially she's scared that he won't. But her and her husband have only been married 8 weeks, and they've fled from Bulgaria, I believe. And she's like, would he forgive me if I did this for us, if I, without telling him, sort of if I slept with somebody else, and sort of the conflict that it puts both of them in. How should he react to a situation like that, and how should she act in a situation like this? And it's obviously very complicated. And in sort of if you apply this to Victor and Ilsa's relationship, Rick is sort of the Louis in this situation. Like, do you think Victor will forgive her for this momentary lapse when it was sort of in the best interest of them, and she thought he was dead, and things like that? But yeah, and obviously they need money. Rick has money, and he lets the husband win at roulette or whatever to get the money. And this brings him and Louis into conflict, and there are teases repeatedly of him and Louis being in conflict, though it dissipates, and obviously that builds up to the end as well. But then they unite against the Nazi dude, and they both get some redemption in the end. Obviously, a classic bit that I'm remembering now is when Louis is forced to shut down the thing, and Rick is like, "Why?" And he does sort of the PR response of, "I'm shocked to find out that gambling is happening here," and then he's given his gambling winnings, and it's haha on the nose, but it was great. But one of the other big notes I have here that we haven't talked about yet, well, I guess we alluded to it a little bit, was the France versus German singing part, where the Germans are sort of, there's a joke earlier on that Carl says, like, "Oh, I already gave the Nazi dude the best seat in the house because I know that he's German and he would have taken it anyway," or something, which is sort of like these fucking greedy Germans, they be taking everything out here, just like they took Poland to start the war and have continued to take places like France, for example. Thieves, these Germans. In that vibe, continuing from that, I forgot my words again. They've got the piano. They've stolen Stam's piano and appropriated it and brought it over to them, and they're singing some German song. I don't know if it's the German national anthem. I don't know if the German national anthem changed from the Nazi one. If the Nazis brought in a new one, I assume they don't still sing the Nazi songs when Germany wins a gold medal at the Olympics or something. But then obviously, I think Victor and Rick are having a scene upstairs at this point. I can't remember what it's specifically about. I think it's about him potentially getting the passes off of him. But obviously there are nowhere near as many Germans as there are Frenchmen, and they start singing the French national anthem, and because Victor goes down to him and says, "Play it," and initially the band is like trepidatious because everybody in the bar is sort of looking over at the Germans singing with a resentment, obviously, because they're all French, and fuck these Germans. And then Rick giving them the nod to start, and then it getting very loud, and obviously there are many more Frenchmen, so they sing way louder, and it drowns out the German singing, and this being a big moment of breaking the Nazi dude as a villain, making him turn like, this is it, we got to do something about Laszlo. If he can do this in a random saloon, what could he do if we let him make it to America? Or if he stays in Casablanca even, this is when the Nazi dude comes to the conclusion that they got to kill him. But it is a great scene. Again, the cut to Yvonne crying and all that stuff, it was great stuff. But yeah. I guess we already talked about the political allegory. America was isolationist at the time. They didn't want to get involved, just like Rick doesn't want to get involved in the movie. Eventually they get involved and they win and do the good thing and stuff like that. I was mentioning the Take video I watched. They talk about the pacing too and the lighting. I already talked about all those things. Here, the only dated aspect of the film are the shooting scenes, though that might have been because they didn't want to show blood, ? There's a shot at the beginning where there's no hole and the dude just awkwardly stumbles, and the Nazi at the end, the plane taking off, looks great, though. The plane shots of the plane coming in and coming out do look great. I don't know how they filmed that back in the day, because I assume they didn't have the budget to have a fucking plane take off. I guess maybe they did. But that's probably not how they shot it. I know they probably used a model and then superimposed 2 shots. I don't know how you do that on 1942 editing software. There is no editing software, Lamau. Nonetheless, there are 2 scenes where people get shot, the Nazi at the end, the dude at the beginning. Both of them are kind of awkward. You can, if you're not being a prick, you can just get over it in like 2 seconds. Most of the time when I see stuff like that, I'm like, oh no, somebody else watching this would be mean about this, and I sort of get secondhand embarrassment for somebody else's view, though I don't care about it that much. But it is something to point out, I guess, that initially, now I assumed that this was just they don't know how to shoot people in films yet, Lamau. But then it came to the conclusion, because the movie is rated PG, so it was probably, I don't know if there's like an ethics board about not showing blood in movies at all, which might be a thing. I know in like the 50s, I think, like Hollywood gets super censored and you can't do anything. And then that sort of comes out of phase in the 60s. We start getting some crazy shit in the 60s, I believe. But nonetheless, so it could just be that they're not allowed to show like gun wounds or anything. Or entry wounds, I guess. Or, yeah, so like the dude clearly, there's no like hole in his back, but he falls down as if he's being shot. And even later, the Nazi dude isn't like missing a wound because they only shoot him from like the top side up, but he just sort of like falls really over dramatically and weirdly. It's cute, I guess. But I wonder, like The Wizard of Oz is the only movie I've seen from around this period. There's no blood in that. I wonder if you're allowed to show blood and stuff. Especially in Hollywood. Like I feel like I've seen notoriety videos with black and white things of like, he's talking about like body horror one, and the one shot I remember of the razor on the eye and stuff like that. That was pretty spooky. I actually don't know if there was blood there. Maybe. But maybe those they haven't figured out how to do that yet. So that was cute. I guess we'll track that if we watch Gone with the Wind and Citizen Kane and things like that, if there's a bunch of blood and stuff. But nonetheless, what other notes do we have here? The Rick being helpful stuff, the characterization stuff. Oh, my last point is there's a specific, as I get the first battery warning, wow. There's a specific meta sadness about knowing everybody you're watching is dead. This happened to me quite a bit in the movie where I would get this sort of wave of like, everybody that's acting in this movie, everybody that's holding a camera off screen, all the people behind this movie, they're all way fucking dead now. Like, Humphrey Bogart, I think is the actor that plays Rick's name. He was born in like 1889 or something. He's like crazy old. It's wild to me when people were born in the 1800s. It's like, that's like way before. Where in the 1900s, it's like, that's kind of believable. The 1800s, people actually existed back then. It's not just stories and stuff. Crazy. But yeah. So that's just there is something about, I wonder if you could probably write a video about that phenomenon and flesh it out a little bit more. I'm sure there are already videos on it. Again, you can't invent anything new. Everything's already been said. Every feeling's already been felt, but there is a specific melancholy. I wonder, because we could watch Sharon Tate movies if we wanted to on movie night. And I wonder if I actually watched a Marilyn Monroe movie too, sort of the the disconnect. I guess I could relate this to Chris Benoit matches, but I really don't feel anything watching Chris Benoit matches. It does pop into your brain a few times. Chris Benoit is a wrestler who killed his wife, his kid, and himself. Big story in 2007, right? Same year Mad Men started. Everything's connected to Mad Men. Mad Men wasn't 2009, was it? No, it was 2007. I know everything. Finished the same year as... Started the same year as Sopranos finished. Nonetheless. What the fuck was I just saying? Oh, sort of the melancholy you get, or the sadness you get of realizing everybody that you're watching is dead. And sort of, I guess it's like a morbid curiosity, because that's already a thing. It's not that, but it's just this morbid, I don't know. It's morbid, I guess. But yeah, it's a funny little feeling. I feel like I was circling back around to say something like saving a point for last, but I don't know if I was. Plot catches you off guard. It's a vibe. I said all these things. What else is there to say? Fuck, there was a point. We can't end it because I'll remember it right after I stop recording and I'll feel bad about it. And I don't want to re-record this one like I did last time. Though I've been pretty happy with this recording so far. We've lost our words at parts, but I feel like we've done it in a structured manner. Was I circling back to the love story angle? The ending's cool. We like it. It's bittersweet. We're getting back in the fight. We're going to talk about the allegory more. Acting, actors. I'm trying to retrace my steps mentally here. Dated aspect. Whether or not they were allowed to show blood. Planes taken off looking good. Rick has a good heart deep down. I know he does. Meta sadness. Characterization we did way earlier. The song Lamau is great. We love it. I guess overall 4.5 stars, I guess? I'm not sure. I'll definitely think about this more. I've gone back to watch many scenes by more. I haven't watched any Blonde reactions. I'm scared because people will probably dislike it and it'll piss me off. I feel like I'm growing more and more against watching scenes out of context. Because I did that a little bit with some scenes in Casablanca, and then before, like an hour before I wanted to record, I went back and I watched that early bit because I thought it was the best part of the movie with the first scene of them seeing each other again. That's why there were so many notes in that. And because there is a part of that scene on YouTube. Just if you just YouTube search, play it, Sam. I guess would be the title. And you do get different vibes. And I think Blonde would be that way, where you sort of have to watch it from the beginning to go through sort of the emotional flow of the movie. To watch things out of context is it changes it a bit. Because in the past, I feel like I'll watch scenes out of context all the time, and I might even make videos not rewatching something and just watching the scene and talking about it or something like that. But I think I'm growing increasingly against that because it is such a different experience having it placed in the overall of a whole, rather than just segmented by itself. Because the bit right before it or the bit right after it could contextualize it in important ways and stuff like that. That's not too Casablanca related. I guess something we didn't really talk about was the fake out Rick going super bad at the end, where he's like, "Can you get him something that'll get him thrown in a concentration camp?" And that's clever because it's so evil that it's like, "Oh no, Rick!" But it's also so evil that you sort of are clued in that he's not going to go through with this and that there's something else afoot here. So it's sort of clever on two levels. But yeah, I don't know. All that stuff, there's middle parts. I guess that one honest scene that Victor and what the fuck why am I forgetting Rick's name right now? But he is sort of like why do you keep fighting talk? And that's also the same talk where they're like, where Victor says we're in love with the same woman. And I think he says something like, "I love her that much" or something, which is a great line. I'm just remembering scenes now. Her and Victor and Isma. Isma is a Berserk character. Ilsa. Ilsa is her name. Fuck me. Them in their hotel room together alone is cute too. All that stuff. But yeah, like if we stop fighting, the world. If we stop breathing, the world dies. If we stop fighting, no. If we stop breathing, we die. If we stop fighting, the world dies. These are all great lines. And it's imperative that Victor is also likable. Almost too likable that you resent him a little bit, but then are happy for him at the end when they both get away. What a great conclusion. What a great payoff at the end to everything. Such a fast-moving plot. The MacGuffins of the papers and stuff, everything just flows well. And it's very, very good, believe it or not. Casablanca, one of the greatest movies of all time. I love it a lot. You know, the more I think about it, because I definitely don't like the movie as much as I liked Blonde. There was just something else that Blonde tapped into, where it was like deeply relatable more than sort of like a romantic look at something. If I was to differentiate them, it was like, man, this movie's so cool and it's so romantic in a sense, more than just LaMalle love story. But Blonde is like disgusting and evil in deeply relatable ways. Where this is like good in sort of deeply relatable ways. But maybe I just like the evil stuff more. Maybe I just like evil people more. What an edgy statement. But like if I'm going to rank Blonde as like my 5th favorite movie ever, which I think I am, if we count the 2 big Ava movies as one spot in our top 10 list, Casablanca is probably 6. Which would mean like maybe it is 5-star, but is everything below that 5-star also? Like Inglourious Bastards, probably 4.5 stars, which would probably be like 7. Django Unchained, probably like 4.5 stars. I feel like Reservoir Dogs, probably 4.5 stars. I might open up my Letterboxd with them after this. But yeah, I think it is the best 4.5 star movie I've ever seen. Perhaps my 6th favorite movie of all time. I guess we should do this at the end of the movie. We got number 1 is still The Godfather Part 2. Number 2 is probably Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Number 3 is End of Ava / Ava 4.0. And number 4 is The Irishman. Oh no. Number 5 would be Jackie Brown. Number 6 would be Blonde. Number 7 would be Casablanca. So it's 7 on down that are 4.5 stars, I think. Man, The Hateful Eight is pretty good though. Probably 4.5 stars though. Nonetheless, that's the top list as we're going through it. Obviously, recency bias is deeply entrenched here. Is Blonde better than The Irishman? Jackie Brown is probably better than The Irishman. I don't think Blonde is better than Jackie Brown. I love Jackie Brown. Anyway, maybe one day we'll do a formal list, but that's generally the top of it. Sometimes Portrait is number 1. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like number 5. Sometimes End of Ava should be number 1, you know? But, you know. Anyway, Casablanca's great. Who Framed Roger Rabbit next week? Can it live up to the legacy of the first 2 movies? I'm actually pretty confident it can. And I might watch it later tonight because I want to watch movies. Watching movies is fun. Talking about movies is fun. Listening to me talk about movies is fun, right, chat? Hopefully you all made it to the end of this. The first video nearly has 100 views. It did okay. Hopefully this one will maintain. I feel like more people have probably seen Casablanca than Blonde. Though Blonde is more topical. We'll see. We'll see how many views this gets. We'll see how many views we get into perpetuity. We're going to continue this on. So next week, everybody watch Roger Rabbit if you haven't seen it. So we can talk about it next week and have fun. And I'll have to decide what we're doing after that shortly, which is exciting. Choosing the next movie could be fun. Knives Out, maybe. Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane. Could be anything. Nonetheless, we're ending it off here. 4.5 stars. The best 4.5 star movie I ever saw in my life. Great stuff. I love the song. Gonna download it, listen to it all the time. Force it into my next relationship somehow. We'll get the Casablanca vibes going. With that being said, be back next week. Support links in the description below. Thanks.